So let's look at the data. Hopefully, and the video is not enough.
Residents and businesses rely on electricity every day. Electricity is something that we're so used to having that we really only notice when it goes away. A quick power outage may interrupt your lights, TV, or computer at home or work. Longer outages can be more troublesome as residential homes lose the ability to cool or heat their homes and refrigerate food. Most businesses cannot operate without electricity, and they lose revenue from idle workers and not producing goods and services. There are many issues that can cause an outage, Mother Nature being the usual suspect: storms, trees, and wildlife. Many electric distribution utilities collect data when there is a power outage. A common method for measuring grid reliability is using the standards developed by the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE. EIA, or the U.S. Energy Information Administration, assembles data from all utilities which calculate these metrics. EIA also inquires whether or not IEEE standards are being followed. Two main data values are collected by EIA: SAIDI, the System Average Interruption Frequency Index, and SAIDI, the System Average Interruption Duration Index. The SAIDI and SAIDI collected are yearly sum values of all non-momentary outages. For utilities that use IEEE standards, non-momentary is defined by any outage lasting more than 5 minutes. Suppose in a small grid of 10 people, a tree falls on a power line and causes 4 people to lose power for 90 minutes. SAIDI of an event is calculated by the number of customers affected divided by the number of customers in the system, or the percent of customers affected. In this instance, 4 customers were affected, 10 customers total, and we get a value of 0.4, or a 0.400 SAIDI value. SAIDI of an event is calculated by the minutes of power out times the number of customers affected divided by the number of customers in the system. It can also be described by the minutes of power out times the SAIDI of an event. Using this formula with the same scenario, we have 90 minutes times 4 customers affected divided by 10 customers total equals 36 minutes, or 36 SAIDI minutes for the event. So the average person lost power 0.4 times, only 4 out of 10 were affected. The average person lost power for 36 minutes. 4 people lost power for 90 minutes, 6 people did not lose power. A value not collected but can be derived from SAIDI and SAIDI is CAIDI, the Customer Average Interruption Duration Index. The CAIDI of an event is the total number of minutes the power is out, but can also be calculated by SAIDI divided by SAIDI. At the end of the year, add all the SAIDI values together to get the yearly SAIDI. Do the same for SAIDI. In this example, you can see that the average person on the grid lost power for 279 minutes total, about 4 hours for the year 2016, in 3.5 outages. The average duration of each outage was 80 minutes. There are 3 different ways SAIDI and SAIDI can be calculated: with major events, without major events, and minus loss of supply. If a utility calculates by any of these ways, they provide that data to EIA. With major events includes all non-momentary outages. That is, everything included, and includes everything from big storms to pesky wildlife. Without major events allows utilities to remove some of the outages to give a better picture of normal operations. Any utility using IEEE standards uses a complicated formula to determine whether or not it was a major event day. Reporting the same SAIDI and SAIDI values for with and without major events means that there were no major events for the year. The last option of reporting is minus loss of supply, and this option is only available to utilities that report using IEEE. This value filters out outage events that are caused by high voltage transmission lines not being able to supply power. If there are power outages due to loss of supply, this metric will be different than SAIFI and SAIDI with major event days. We are thankful to live in a country that has access to electricity at our fingertips almost all the time. It's so necessary and reliable that we get irritated and inconvenienced when it goes out. When power does come back on, you can look at EIA data or an indication of how reliable your distribution utility is. We hope that all utilities eventually report their data by IEEE standards. While you probably cannot change your utility, at least their reliability metrics will be comparable.
So, that was better than I could possibly do. You can write your name on top of your paper and you can test about this material. So, SAIDI, SAIFI, and CAIDI, those are the three things we're going to talk about and concentrate on. You just heard me discuss what SAIDI is, average duration over the system. SAIFI is frequency, average frequency over a system. And CAIDI is the average duration for a customer. MLGW has also insisted a little outside the norm on those. Somebody asked about the 10 largest public power utilities. Once again, we've got some work to do. Our numbers here. Now, keep in mind though, when you look at other utilities, you gotta kind of, particularly the 10 largest utilities, you gotta kind of keep in mind that when did their system evolve? What type of technology was there when they had their high growth period? If it was something that said, okay, a particular city grew at the time where underground was thoroughly available, and they had a lot of rapid growth during that period, then a large percentage of their customer base may be served by underground utilities, and they have a different number. If they converted their system, New York is one example. New York has a network system. It's probably the most expensive system you can put out there. But they probably have very few outages that are caused by any of our problems. They have outages. They do have outages, and when they have outages, they are a big deal. But they don't have the outage frequency or outage characteristics. So some cities will have different numbers based on the evolution of that city. Some cities will have different numbers because of their storm activity. It may not storm as much in Phoenix as it does in Memphis. So you have to keep all that in mind with these various numbers when you compare cities. That's why we like to kind of compare to our past history, which you saw those numbers, and kind of look at overall standards with IEEE or EIA. So excluding major events, this is kind of where we fall. Kind of middle of the pack, good numbers up until about 2018. Once again, we're trying to get that infrastructure plan in. Safety comparison, excluding major events, we're in the ballpark. If we can take out our major events, our basic operations, we do pretty well. Katie, once again, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, excluding major events, our basic operation, how we operate day by day, we're in the ballpark now. And that, my folks, concludes, I believe, my presentation. Is that it? Okay. So, we're going to shift now. This would be where you were supposed to get your break, but you've already taken your break. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. No, seriously, you need to break it out. But we want to shift now into getting some feedback from you, some questions. I'm going to turn it over to Ron so we can facilitate that. We're going to try to get your information on the screen. So, once again, say your name, give your question. We want to talk about your experiences, what you saw through the landing event, and what you experienced from MLGW. things that we can do better. So, and then your questions, suggestions, what we can do to serve you better. And Ms. Anderson has a question. Give her a mic.
Okay, we will have mics coming around the room, so wait for the mic to come. There's one coming behind here. Is there somebody here?
Yeah. Are they covered? Is this one for what I just covered? Or is this one? Yes.
My name is Aretha Anderson from Southwest Community College. When you were going through your presentation, and everybody would be interested in seeing, you have some of those people who are out correcting the property damage. Why not bring one of them, some of them here, so we can feel that experience, the preparing and the restoration of.
Probably the area of concern, and that was the area of concern that caused the questions around text alerts not being accurate, text alerts not coming in, not getting updates on outages, and that sort of thing.
I neglected to identify myself, George Barnes, civil engineer, consultant at large. And I have one more point, and I think I'm a master of statements, simple statements, and that is that this I see as a triumvirate between the city of Memphis, MLGW, and the citizens. And I'm thinking if we can engage the citizens more by giving them an incentive to cut their service line trees and other things that obstruct the service lines, which prevent them from getting power and restoration of power, that might be something, like an incentive of 5%, 10%, I don't know, per year on their electric bill. Something like that, to me, to give an incentive to these citizens to do something to help them and to help MLGW save money and get the things done sooner.
Thank you. And I also want to know, we do have a distribution automation system, which I talked about earlier, that we're implementing. That's probably the biggest and most, you'll see the customers see a lot of improvement with the distribution automation system as far as being able to isolate outages quickly. So that's in process. That's not fully implemented yet. Yes.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have the mic.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Calvin Burton. I'm representing the White community. If I'm correct, most of our outages occur because of trees or limbs falling on the wire. Am I correct?
That's the probably largest percentage of the damage.
Okay. And we have a tree trimming process that MLGW handles.
That's
So,
correct.
to me, if the trees or limbs are falling on the wires, then that process is not that effective. So, if we know that that is a major problem, it seems like it should be pretty simple to try to remove the tree, because I think somewhere in the earlier thing, I forgot how many billions of dollars it costs for the restoration process. So it seems like that fee could be cut some kind of way if we can eliminate the trees.
Very good point. And we do have a tree trimming process. We are behind on that, but we're trying to get that up to the schedule that we want, which is about a 3-year schedule. But there are trees that
Clarification. But I guess what I'm trying to say, and I do understand that you are behind on the process, but if I'm trimming the limbs and the tree falls, am I defeating my purpose? Because there are no limbs, the tree is falling. That's going to cause the outage, not the limbs, because the limbs have already been cut. So
regarding the young ladies mentioning of conduits of communication. And this is more of a statement. There are many times people who are isolated in these communities, elderly especially, and I don't know process-wise, but not just how do other systems handle communication with these customers, but for those people who are vulnerable, where workers are out in communities and see a need, the ability to reference or connect them with agencies or get agencies to connect with them. And I know that's not what MLGW does, But, you know, at some level, whether it's something you get to know via being out in those communities, you run into these folks. So just mentioning what that is or what it could look like, I have no idea. There may be some systems in place, but there are a lot of willing workers here who are in place to help folks like this, and many times these are elderly folks isolated in their communities. Point number one. Point number two, you guys don't get enough credit for how hard these crews work. And I might suggest that, you know, the picture from a long ways of a bunch of stuff.
Linda Williams, Roselle Ansdale, Young, Glenview, Midtown, and the Neighborhood Advisory Council. I want to give my time over to a tree expert.
Thank you. And with the tree companies, and I've said this once, I said it 1,000,000 times. Hire a professional to come out and inspect your trees before these storms hit. Hire a professional to come in after the storms hit to make sure that you don't have an additional after the day of the storm. So I can go on and on about this, but there's a lot of responsibilities that come with living in the urban forest. These trees have a lifespan on how long that they're going.
MLGW person to be on that meeting is virtual. So we can just send them a link and they can be on the meeting so more people can get their concerns addressed. The second one is, I had 2 elderly people with the same problem. When MLGW started changing the dates for when the utilities were due, they threw them out of their rhythm where they usually get their checks the first of the month and they could pay it. But when they changed them, then that threw them out and they were always behind and having to pay late fees. So that's one thing that you might be able to look at. And then last night, I was coming through that storm. I had just gotten out of training. And the first light I came to on Sycamore View, it was green, but before I could get to it, it was green and red. So I didn't know what to do. So I was nervous then. Then I got to Robin LaGrange and Sycamore View, and that light was out. So my concern is, I don't know how to address, or if there's a way that you can kind of see what areas have these issues and try to address them where they'll be a little better, because I came on through Raleigh and to Fraser, and all of those lights were up. But, you know, and the water was everywhere, it was just a mess. So I'm still traumatized right now. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you again for a very informative presentation. I have a couple of questions. Number one, are there functions that activated by, I'm sorry, Jason Farmer, corporate customer, Whitehaven. Are there functions that an activated volunteer corps can perform to assist during these major events? Number two, is de-icing of the utility lines similar to the icing of airplanes during expected ice events? Is that an option, or is that something that's currently used to protect the lines from sagging? Number three, this is one that I've had quite a few people reach out to me on. Does MLGW adjust billing during the customer's time if they're offline? I took the initiative to say yes, they do, but I'm not qualified to answer that, but that's a question I've been asked several times. I guess the fourth question I had, is there a certification process to engage more tree vendors to help speed up the timeline and trimming the trees back? The next one, are there robocalls that can go out to landlines? Like yesterday,
The school systems like called everybody numerous times to say, hey, the schools were dismissing, but there were no after-school activities on yesterday, and those calls come out to landlines and also to cell phones. And that's it. Those are my questions or comments.
And again, not to attempt to address these aging underground lines that are failing, and I think your point's valid in that in terms of being able to reflect any conversion of overhead to underground explicitly is not in there. So that's a good point. Thank you.
Bo Mills, City of Germantown. Thinking back to your boots on the ground, Mr. Monzo, you said you had 40 troubleshooters. My experience is the tremendous value for those troubleshooters. When those folks pull up on the scene and they're able to talk to customers and kind of explain what's going on, I think that they bring quite a bit of value to the customer experience. And to me, 40 troubleshooters in an event like Landon is woefully low for what you guys might need. So my suggestion would be a way to be able to bring more troubleshooters into the role, and then also to think about the community.
Earlier, but as an old utility guy, I think the last thing you want to do is to give a specific restoration time too early in an event. Because if you do and you don't meet that time, you come out, you know, there's no way you come out with a good time. Now, I understand you need to tell people something, like maybe to tell them, hey, this is going to be days instead of hours, or it's going to be more than a week, or something like that. That's okay, some number like that, but I would not put out a specific day or anything like that until you really know, because if you don't hit it, you look bad. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, over here.
Linda Williams again. Someone just said something I have to address about when we're talking about cutting down the trees. We're also talking about replanting trees. This is something we need to make sure we do, especially this month. Replant trees that will not create a lot of problems. Like we did when we stopped planting all those Bartlett pear trees down in Hurricane Deltas. We have to be smart. We have to teach, and that's the other point. We need workshops to educate the public on their responsibilities, things they can do to make this better. When they plant trees, the type of trees they need to plant. That's why we need professional arborists helping us. That's what we have in Glenview. Anyway, that's with the trees. The other thing, and when we did research, almost everybody I talked to said they would love for us to have a system where they
thoughts and questions, but specifically on your 5-year plan, what does wood pole management mean? And I've asked MLGW a lot about installing steel poles instead of wood poles, and fewer steel poles, less wood poles, and I'm curious if y'all like run the numbers on that. What's kind of stress?
Various spots. So that, in a nutshell, is probably what happened in your instance, in your neighbor's instance. And it happens a lot throughout our system. There will be parts of a neighborhood or parts of a block that are out, and then other parts that are on. that's because the damage occurred somewhere in between the source and those other neighbors, not necessarily affecting you.
Christine Aston, Cherokee Heights, Orange Mountain, and South Memphis. Since we're streaming live, I want Mr. Monzo to answer the question for those. They ask the question all the time as to why do out east get on before south? So since we're streaming live, please answer the question for those people that's asking that. Thank you.
Before you repeat your question, I didn't quite get all of that.
Most time in South Memphis, the people are saying, out east gets on, the outage is taken care of before South Memphis.
Okay.
Since we're streaming live,
Sure.
I understand, but they're saying
Right.
that. Okay.
Right, so one thing about our MLGW system is how it evolved. It evolved from west to east. So from the river going out to the county line, Sugar County line. As it evolved, it went from overhead, back property line, to underground. So as you get further east, you've got neighborhoods and that are an underground distribution system. When we dispatch crews to go out and do repairs, we dispatch crews throughout the city whenever there's damage. But it will take, say if the crew works 8 hours on one major feeder that feeds several underground neighborhoods, they'll be able to do that repair and get a lot of customers back home. So you'll see the eastern part of our county come back up quicker than say a crew that is within the loop. They work 8 hours on a tap and then find, or a circuit for that matter, but there's also damage further down the line because it's all overhead back property line system. So crews work throughout our system. We're not prioritizing a particular neighborhood. Our process is around getting circuits up and getting as many customers on per effort that we put forth. So we'll do circuits first, but many times within the loop, we'll have damage beyond just the initial outage where everybody doesn't come up once we energize that circuit. So I hope that explains the question.
And I think another important point if I make, Alonzo, is those neighborhoods out east, the developers paid that money to put the power underground, not MLGW. So that was a decision that those developers made as they were building those neighborhoods, I would assume in most instances.
Correct. Developers pay for all that.
This has to do with communication, and it seems like we have done a very good job of communicating, very good job of communicating to the people that they need to call when the power goes out. We just look at the numbers, outages, and look at the figure here in the graph. It's almost one-to-one numbers, even if you have some duplicates. That's a very high number, and it drops off after that. What's missing, though, is, I think we talked about last time, is the need to call again. And what's missing is good information as to when you should do that. Under what circumstances. Do you wait until you have power come on and then go off, or is it off 2 days? And so it's something along like that. And you've got already, besides adequate and more than adequate access to the media, but this wonderful little information brochure that comes out with the bill each month to educate people about that particular kind of solution to some of the problems, some of the information problems they have.
There's a question in the back.
My name is Gail Phillips, and I'm just a resident, and I'm a member of 21st Century Memphis, and we formed a little group because we were without power and we were concerned about how things were going to be handled in the future with our power outages. So my question is about the 5-year plan. Now, is this the plan that began in January of 2020?
Hand that off to you then, Jason.
Okay, and Doug, do you have some closing thoughts or anything you want to share from your perspective? Good, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. The other aspect of the storm and restoration, the cleanup effort, and I talked to you about giving you a little bit of data on that. So, just for reference, the stuff that everybody brought to the curb, whether you're a contractor or you did it yourself, in the city of Memphis, every year on curbside trash, things that are outside the cart, we pick up 400,000 cubic yards of curbside trash in a year. In the last 2 months, just of storm debris, just branches, we picked up 700,000 cubic yards. That is 1 3/4 years worth of curbside trash picked up just in 2 months. We're about 80% complete with the second sweep of the city. So we also, as a part of that, and some of you I know had some issues, folks, were picking dangerous branches, ones that were broken and dangling. They may have been on private property, but they were within the right of way. We have cut 50,000 dangerous branches down. That was part of that effort. So the city so far has spent $22.5 million. You heard MLGW restoration during the event. We spent $22.5 million so far with emergency contractors collecting all of this debris. So it was a very large event for us. Now, just like MLGW, we will be reimbursed about 75 to 80% of that. It was taking a little longer because we had to have FEMA crews with us to inspect to make sure that that was a valid pickup. And as you all have seen, when the truck comes down the street, he picks everything up, the first thing that happens is the neighbor says, ooh, and he brings all this stuff out to the curb, so that's why we were doing a second sweep. Let's see. I guess the other thing I wanted to mention, because somebody talked about it before, the traffic signals. That's a really good point. There's an intersection between traffic signals from the city and MLGW, and oftentimes you have to determine, is it a traffic signal problem or is it the power getting to the traffic signal? If it's flashing, or if it's not operating correctly, but the lights are on, that's a city issue with the traffic signal. If it's out completely, that usually means it doesn't have power. But we diagnose that, and I want you to know there's 794 signalized intersections in the city and the county that we maintain. We have fiber optics that go to all of those, and we automatically get a signal when one of those goes out. So our engineering department knows when any one of those is out. And then they will begin to diagnose what the issue is. Is it a power interruption, or was it something with the actual fiber optics or the control system there? So we are aware of the confluence of power and what we have to do. One thing, I know we're not going to answer all the questions here, but I think the gentleman asked about de-icing, what they do with airplanes. I just want to address that up front. The material that they use to de-ice airplanes has to be done in a specialized facility. It's a glycol base, which is poisonous to animals, and has to be collected. So there may be other solutions that are not poisonous, but we can't just use the same thing as airplanes for, because it would be an EPA, it would get violated. People wouldn't be very happy, but it's a great thought, and there may be some different approaches we can use there. Unfortunately, and I know JT will get to this, the 28th is our next in-person meeting. The library is not available. We have book stop going on, our annual library event. We will find another location for us to be in person. I assume, JT, you want to talk about that, but if we choose to be in person, we'll find another location that's convenient for everybody. But unfortunately, the library is not available because they have an annual event here that's important to a lot of people. So sorry for the inconvenience on that. Again, thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. So to that point, as we wrap up, thank you again. This has really exceeded what we expected. So the input that you all have provided is exactly what we're going to need. And again, don't stop today. You heard Brian talk about the public portal that's available, but as we get together, when we get together the next time, certainly we'll take some time to augment these comments with whatever else you may want to share. So do appreciate that. And to the point you made about the next meeting, we do have the opportunity to have this, I kind of call it an audible, Doug and I did during a break, And I know on your agenda, it mentions that we will probably do our next meeting virtually. I really do think that being in person is a benefit, and so we're suggesting that we keep this format as we can. And so, although the 28th is not available, the 6th of May is Friday, and I get it, it's probably not, may not work that well, is available. You may likely see us send you a meeting notice for Friday the 6th, because there's something special about keeping it at the same location. I've learned over time. People figure out they get comfortable coming to one place, so we're going to try to do that. But it may be on May the 6th, just so you keep that in mind, and we'll send a confirming notice to make sure you know where that's going to be. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Angela. I will remind you to read your email. Ms. Anderson said, read your email. You can tell she's in teaching, instructing. She's a professor at Southwest, so she's doing that's exactly right. I'm married to a teacher, so I get this all the time. Thank you very much. So read your emails. And then, so the other thing I want to just kind of wrap up with, great input, and we're going to condense this input and have it available, and then we'll spend some time next time talking about what some of the opportunities might be as we begin to refine some specific solutions. I want to mention a couple of quick things that I think are important. So just kind of remember something that we fight and battle with all the time. So the old adage that you get what you pay for rings true in just about anything. So one of the things that we constantly are dealing with is trying to make sure we remain, as you heard Dana talk about, when you see the new 2022 rating pricing comparison that we're putting together, you're going to see that we're still very, very favorably positioned comparatively. We benchmark very well with our price. It may be a correlation between that and some of the challenges we're having with infrastructure, I suspect. So I want everybody to just keep in mind that much of what we could do is going to require resources from somewhere. And there, as I say, I'm kind of getting known for this statement, there is no magic money. And so I'll use that term to just kind of let y'all know that. So I want us to just remember that. It doesn't shut down the process at all, but I do want us to keep that in mind. So remember that. The other thing I'll mention too, Doug and I had this conversation, and Alonzo just reminded me, when you see our customer numbers, anytime you see in our presentations numbers of customers, and this is an industry standard, the utility industry uses meter points to designate a customer, okay? So if you saw the number 186,000 customers, right? And so that's 186,000 meter locations in our system. That does not represent the number of people impacted. And honestly, if I could wave a wand, I would count customers by real people, because what we provide affects people, doesn't just affect what's at that meter location. So you may have had, we may have had 186,000 meter locations impacted, but that very likely could have been 300, 400, 500,000 real people impacted. And so what I want us to kind of keep thinking about is that when we said, I think at the first meeting, I know many of you weren't at the first, we talked about 55% during Landon of our customer base was impacted. And if you think about, of course, just the population of Shelby County, right, which we serve, it's over 500,000 people. Then if you add on to that, which I also count as customers, people visiting the community. So at any given time, we may have thousands of people here that don't live here, but they're visiting here. So one hotel, may have 300 rooms, 400 rooms, but it's one premise, but it's got a lot of people. All that to say that what we do impacts probably much more than the numbers, any number that you might see us represent. And I don't want to minimize that. I think that's very important. That just kind of adds to, I think, the importance and the significance of what you all are doing and the input that you all are providing us. So again, I think both times we've met, this is another reason to do it in person, we've been able to get out early before we said. So we're on a good track record, and I don't want us to miss that. So, but thank you again, and before we do leave, anything else, Brian, do you have anything, or is there anything else we need to cover? So again, look out for your information. We'll likely change the date of our next meeting so that we can still do it here in person. And I know that may put some of y'all out, and I apologize for that, but we'll try to figure it out. Anything else we need to cover before we're done? Again, thank you everyone for your input. Everybody stay safe. God bless weekend. A good Easter. Blessed weekend.